Welcome to the show, everybody. I want to remind all of you to like and subscribe on YouTube. It's youtube.com/film talk radio. We've got a very exciting guest today. This is Steve Poikonen from Slow News Day and AM Wake Up, and you can watch them both on Rockfin. And today we're going to be talking about movies that predicted the future. Hey, Steve, thanks for joining us.
Hey, man, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
So I think maybe we can start out a little bit with the robot films, right? Like the Terminator, I think, is one that I'm often looking to. The article I looked up said, well, they created drone warfare. They predicted drone warfare, but they predicted a lot more than that with the chip that makes the robots intelligent, the robots eventually turning on the people. So if that's a good starting point, what else happened in the Terminator that we're seeing today?
Skynet. Skynet happened in the Terminator, and I think we've seen multiple manifestations of that to the point that where there's an actual company that calls itself Skynet that markets surveillance software. So we went and built, you know, a mechanical shark just so we could jump it over and over and over and over with this thing. And it's we've got, just recently, a couple of months ago, city of San Francisco had to back down on rolling out robot police officers that came with an explosive charge. They backed off of it a little bit, but it's one of those things where, okay, we'll show you the capability of what we have. Even though you freak out about it, we'll backpedal a little bit, but it's right here. So we've got robot cops, we've got Skynet, we've got programs where they're definitely trying to chip people. We've got, well, volunteers in Sweden who have succumbed to, or I guess showed up for on their own volition to be chipped for their workplace. So a lot of the things that most of the overarching themes that were presented in Terminator we're currently living in or about to live in.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the dystopian things from science fiction are now a reality. So many of the things they scared us with in a film like The Terminator or, its many sequels. Another one, what about, since you brought up surveillance, The Truman Show was another one. And there was a whole article about all the different ways that predicted the future. Some of them I think had been done in other movies, but the surveillance, the reality TV, so much of this kind of, I guess Rene Descartes, they say, came up with the idea first that we're being manipulated and not seeing what's real.
Mhm.
But
So okay, we were talking about a lot of this really this week on AM Wake Up. Jay Dyer came back through and he's really good at breaking down a lot of this. There's a ton of movies for really from the 90s that I don't know, it's more I guess revelation of the method than anything else, but it's heavy on the predictive programming too. And with the Truman Show, you have this aspect of this could be anybody. Anybody's reality could be manipulated like this. There could be an entire audience behind what this person's day is like. And oftentimes it really, there's moments in life where you just kind of look around for the camera crew because it doesn't seem right. Do you know what I mean? Even sometimes when you're driving, you look at the sky and all of a sudden it looks like Mario Kart instead of real life for a minute. And I mean, we've talked extensively about, you know, weather modification programs and drone art and things like that. Like we're not out of the realm holographic art. We're not out of the realm of possibility for completely manufactured reality. So when it comes down to disclosure in film like this, I think one of the kind of more subtle substreams of it is that reality itself, for at least for people who are just moving along in the mainstream, is more or less a construct of marketing. I have to let my dog in. He's whining.
Another 80s film, it predicted the VR headsets. I guess we're maybe going to backtrack a little bit there, but Back to the Future 2 had some other stuff as well. It had the hoverboard. It what the clothing that sized itself.
Yep, they had a variation of I think Reebok pumps or something like that too. Shoe modifications. There's now shoes right now that they're like the old lifts from the 70s, but they are filled with air and they make you appear a little like 2.5 inches taller or some kind of crazy. Instagram's a wild place sometimes, man. Um, no, let's see. There was some other stuff. Oh, uh I'm almost positive that in Back to the Future 2, they basically have like a WeChat thing where everything that you do is dialed up on one unit and all of the different aspects of your life. Like you're not making individual purchases anymore. That's all done
Yeah, I
remotely.
thought Venmo was really Orwellian, right? That you're gonna publish what you're spending money on. I mean, I don't know what most people are spending their money on, but most of my purchases I'd like to keep secret.
Yeah, I don't need to advertise a lot of my purchases. I definitely don't. And on top of that, I really do feel like there's a trap being set in the blockchain space, especially where money's concerned. I've always made the argument that if you're going to have a public immutable ledger, the last thing anybody would want is their personal financial information out there and on it. But for some reason, because there's a liberation theology attached to it, it's okay now. I don't really know how that works. I like cash and barter though.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Then lately we've been hearing it referred to a lot as The Matrix, and that's another movie where you kind of get a glimpse of, okay, is this something that they know is going to happen? Is it already happening? It started a lot with William Gibson, who of course predicted the internet, the Matrix, the metaverse. All those things were in his early novels. But then, the Matrix becomes this huge blockbuster about this alternate reality, people being kind of raised for the slaughter to power it. How how do you think that fits into this world that we're now living?
So there's a couple of different origin stories for the Matrix, one of them being like ancient Hindu texts. Then there's a lot of pre-existing mythology that was put into the film in general. And it was a comic book or a graphic novel, I'm pretty sure, before it was anything else. So they had time to really tailor the storyline for Hollywood. And I think that what we got out of the Matrix films was the the rise of the machines, I guess, as it were, is inevitable. That there is going to be um, a significant amount of time where I guess cloud based life is kind of a thing. And then with the most recent Matrix movie, it seemed like the point of the whole film was, and that's okay, really, because you can just have whatever kind of Matrix you want, and it's a synthetic reality. So go ahead and fly, Neo, because that's what you can do here, and you don't have to worry about the bad guys because you can just dial up a good future, and the Matrix will provide it for you. So ultimately, you've got the Wachowski brothers or sisters, telling you buy into the system. The system is going to work out for you. Go ahead and shed any sort of revolutionary or opt out tendencies you may have because the machine, it loves you. It does, really, it does. It was just trying to straighten you out a little bit. You overreacted. That's your fault.
And the first film was warning of it in a way, but by the third one, the message is to accept that there's no way out.
That's kind of what it seemed like. Yeah. And I mean, I could be interpreting it wrong, and there could be people who come and scream at me after this for my take on it. But the whatever the I think the fourth one with like older Neo, the older what's her name, Trinity. Yeah, the end message in that film was go ahead and buy into the Matrix, bub, because it's working for you.
And didn't we see a news story recently where they're growing babies similar to the way
There's a company that's in stage 4 of its funding, and it's trying to become operational by 2025, which is one of those sustainable development goal magic years and magic numbers. Um, and yeah, I mean, the presentation they put forward is horrifying because it really does look like pod babies being grown in a freaking warehouse, which essentially is what it is. But what's even creepier is that they're offering like bodysuit, like a bodysuit thing to where you could feel your baby kick, as opposed to stabbing a kid, I guess. But there's all these, you hook up, you connect to an app so that you can connect with your pod baby in a Romanian warehouse. And then you can feel it move and kick. I mean, that's so far out of the scope of real to me that it's hard to fathom. But yeah, that's what they're pushing.
Steve, let's go to a short little break, and I'd love to hear more about some of the science fiction themes from yore that are now part of our life, and some things that were always there that movies were shining a light on. Everybody, stay tuned. We're talking with Steve Poikonen of AM Wake Up on Rockfin and also Slow News Day. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking with the co host of Slow News Day and your AM Wake Up. This is Steve Poikonen, and we're talking about films that predicted the future. Some of these prescient movies that, we saw long ago and it was chilling and scary, and now it's a part of our everyday life. So, I think virtual reality has been predicted in a lot of movies. And, you look at a movie like Ready Player One more recently, and all the way back to something like The Running Man or, excuse me, Lawnmower Man. How. How did they make it look in those days, and what are we living with today that is virtual reality being thrust upon us a bit, where in these movies it seemed like something you opted into?
So, okay, I think at this point, virtual reality is still something that you opt into, at least on a personal level. But we've been exposed to, I guess, an augmented reality in and of itself for quite a while. And this is on just some simple stuff, like they'll show you enhanced, and it's presenting an image that isn't natural and calling it real. We're at the point of headsets in classrooms in a number of cases. We've done a couple of things on the show about new tech gadgets and what they're going to do. There was a Black Mirror-esque workstation that if you were on an exercise bike, it powered your laptop. And as long as you were, exercising, you could also continue to work. This is a thing that's being marketed and sold right now. Like, it's not even as a joke, but as a real product. Uh, so
Well, and
it's
I think,
weird. Well,
yeah,
go ahead.
I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say the implications of what they could do with that are chilling, to say the least. I mean, it's a human hamster wheel of sorts.
It really and truly is. And when I was growing up, my mom's uncle lived down in like Cocoa Beach, Florida, or Indian Harbor, Florida, or something like that. And this is in the 80s, and this guy had his exercise bike hooked up to his TV. So if he wanted to watch TV, he had to exercise. And I thought that was pretty cool. But we've gone like the complete opposite direction to now where if you want to pay rent, you're gonna have to get on the bike. It's interesting to me to watch like the vaporwave animation, like in Lawnmower Man, or where it's still gridded out and stuff like that. That's coming back in terms of, you know, promotional art and stuff, and people have incorporated a lot of that style of artwork into what they're doing right now, 25 years later, 35 years later, something like that. Like, oh yeah, 35 years later. um so it's almost as we enter the phase where our lives are living this technology that was predicted 30, 40 years ago, the art and the fashion is starting to mimic it too, as sort of a capture of a, you know, a bygone era. But we're sort of all being dressed a certain way, told to be, now we have to behave a certain way, and a lot of the ridiculous compliance measures that you see in all of those sci-fi films, where people are, you know, going along with some of the most ludicrous demands either by a state or a corporation, people are doing right now. They've been more, you know, either bullied into it or become part of this social engineering experiment that we call being alive in the 21st century. uh, and they're acting like someone would act in RoboCop era Detroit when faced with a half man half machine all cop.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up RoboCop because that was another prescient one. And I mean, on AM Wake Up recently, you had a guy with the virtual reality goggles on his face, on his over his eyes, and then he's got another thing that he straps over his mouth and screams into. And I mean, you'd think it was satire, but this is a product that they're marketing. Some gag you can put over your mouth to make you quiet, to shut you up.
It's supposed to allow you to have a private conversation at your cubicle. That's the marketing behind it. You put this like muzzle box over your face, and then you can talk into it at regular volume, or you can yell into it, and it's got a Bluetooth mic in it that will send it to somebody else, but it'll muffle or distort the sound coming out of it. So instead of sounding like you're yelling at someone, it sounds kind of like you're gagging on something. And it's pretty silly. Pretty silly.
And so, where is the disconnect where in the movies a lot of these technologies seem exciting and awesome, and then the real versions of them seem really silly or nerdy, you know, or uncool.
Because in the movies, you've got it being presented by super hot Hollywood actors. And in reality, you've got it being presented by, like, you know, Joey, you know, it's never kissed a girl before. And it's just, it's a bad presentation. But not only is it a bad presentation, what you're doing is actively seeking ways to make people less human and to disconnect people more and more from humanity. And on a very visceral level, I think when the majority of people are confronted with something so visibly anti-human, their initial instinct is to recoil from it. You got to really convince people to detach from humanity all the way. And there's been a 50 to 70 year, you know, concerted effort to get people to do that. So it is working. It's how you get stuff like this in the first place. But at our core, I think most of us are inherently horrified by all of this.
Yeah, I think that happens in science fiction films, right? Where the institutions become all powerful, the community centers or strongholds become attacked. You see it in Star Wars. The early Star Wars pretty clearly mapped out. So, is that kind of empire? I mean, it's almost like they saw these movies and thought, oh, these guys, Darth Vader seems like a great guy. Let's mimic that. Or they saw the Matrix and identified with the machines. Where do you think that how are we losing our humanity, Steve?
There's a very long streak of anti-human Malthusian individuals who have been in very influential places, either as heads of state or as advisors to or influential members of corporations throughout human history, but specifically the last 160 years. And they have demonized everything that it is to be a human. Humans are ugly, oafish, clumsy, stupid, uh, rotten to each other, rotten to the core, messy, bad stewards of the planet. We've destroyed the climate change is all our fault and all that kind of stuff. It's an individual person's fault. It's not the fault of the U.S. military, which pollutes globally more than anyone. It's not the fault of people who are specifically dumping poison into the water and the soil and the air. No, it's you, filthy human. This is your fault. And so if you can convince people through art, through pop culture, then through and at the academic level that these things are true, you can get them to go along with it on a level. Now, there's always a ton of sacrifice that has to be made. And when they show you this stuff in sci-fi, everything that you're sacrificing is it's always your human connections, and it's always whatever rights you had previously in order to survive in what is now used to be in old science fiction. There were governments that were totalitarian and led the future. Now it's always a corporation. So you're effectively what science fiction has taught us is that whoever controls the tech controls the future, including whatever passes for a government. Whatever passes for a government will always bow to who holds the superior technology. And that's what needs to be idolized, worked towards, and the archetypes that they have in leadership positions in those companies are things that should be emulated.
Speaking of companies, Steve, let's take a short break for these messages.
Sounds good.
And we'll come back. We'll talk more. Everybody, this is Steve Poikonen, the co host of Slow News Day and your AM Wake Up on the Rockfin. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking with the co host of Slow News Day and AM Wake Up on Rockfin. Everybody, this is Steve Poikonen.
Hey.
Steve, we were talking about some really cool science fiction films, and I know you're a really good fan of a lot of things, including hip hop. And so let's take it back to the 80s, the 1983 film War Games, starring Matthew Broderick.
Yeah.
This article, it says, it kind of predicted a lot of the World Wide Web stuff, the war games. There's allegations of Russian hackers influencing foreign elections. There's so much in that film that now has become reality. Please tell us more.
Okay, so in the first place, for anyone who has watched the movie War Games, Hack the Planet, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1984. This is a law that's in place that governs how people behave on the internet, was passed because Congress watched this movie and got scared. I'm not kidding. I'm not making that up. The law that governs behavior on the internet was created and written after Congress watched War Games. And they were so freaked out by this that almost 40 years later, that law remains untouched. It's one of the things that the Biden administration is currently charging WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange under. He's got 17 charges under the Espionage Act of 1917, even though he's an Australian citizen with a news outlet registered in Iceland and doesn't operate in the US. But there's an additional charge under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And what that would effectively do is criminalize investigative journalism for everybody going forward, because it completely dismantles source protection and says that you can't help a source remain anonymous in order to avoid going through the life of living hell that all whistleblowers do when they stick their necks out. So yes, there was a lot of prediction on how web behavior was going to go and how hackers would operate and this like that. Even there's a little bit of like a forerunner to elite speak that shows up in just online shorthand, internet shorthand, that kind of thing, that shows up in war games. So there's, you know, a little early forerunner to LOLs and all of that are in there, and emoji, you know, original keyboard emojis and stuff. So there's that, but at the same time it turned into real life legislation almost immediately after. And so more or less everything that we are quote unquote allowed to do on the internet in the United States is a result of that film.
Wow. And I mean, it's a silly movie. It's there's some kind of drama built in it, but I mean, watching it nowadays, it just seems kind of ridiculous. Um,
Well,
we've
the
also,
DoD is not supposed to be that hackable, but it turns out, you know, that you can run an entire cybersecurity operation based on a movie. You can create, you know, dozens of unaccountable bureaucracies based off of Matthew Broderick
well,
screwing around at the keyboard when he's 12.
I also started noticing that all these very powerful people within the Democratic Party about 4 years ago all have cybersecurity companies. I thought that was kind of like, okay. And then you find out cybersecurity companies don't really do anything. I hope there's not a Lifelock commercial after this.
That's funny. No, I mean they really do, but what there's a couple of different facets to the ongoing money laundering operation that is the international war machine, and surveillance is a huge component of that. So if you can leave the government, form a company, and then convince people in the government that you used to work with that they should give no bid contracts to your company, then you can at least sort of supply kind of some software, and then, you know, level up in terms of your own personal net worth pretty easy. So it's a great gig if you can get it.
I see. So, there was also, speaking of the US military and their involvement of this, there was a film called Short Circuit in 1986 that predicted military robots or what they would look like in a lot of ways. And they even made a sequel.
Heck yeah.
Um,
Heck yeah.
yeah, I mean, so this is, I guess, the military robots we're dealing with now is that they look a lot like the Clone Wars in the Star Wars prequels, but the Short Circuit films did have this intelligent robot that is loose on the public. We're
Well,
right on the verge of that, right? iRobot is another one where the robots have rules. I think the robots we're dealing with are going to break all these rules, apparently.
so the at least with the premise, at least with Short Circuit, they were trying to make it some kind of funny, right? They were trying to do a comedy about the machines rising and gazing. Yeah, if I remember right, Short Circuit was the one where it was like there was part of a riff off of Frankenstein too, because number Johnny Five didn't get his full awareness until he got struck by lightning or something like that. Um, so they at least tried to cornball it up a little bit. But yeah, at the root of it, it's a horrifying tale about the rise of the machines. You know, and iRobot is another one of those situations where you had in the writings of Isaac Asimov the rules that would govern AI, and these were supposed to be, you know, unbreakable, unchangeable parts of all the source code for all artificial intelligence robots, and one of them was a do no harm to humans thing. And at which point you would think that somebody would ask, Well, why wouldn't they just take out the person that made them and who gave the origin of the problem? Go for the person who created you, not the people who are just kind of wandering around. They didn't have anything to do with you being here, buddy.
Minority Report of 2002. Spielberg, for that one, put together a bunch of futurists to help him kind of map out what it may be like. There's, they're predicting crimes, and it's a thought crime that hasn't happened yet, and then there are detectives that'll track them down. We're seeing some of that in governments and corporations.
Yeah. So we have a pre-crime division now. The United States Department of Justice does. It went live January 2021, January 1st. There's a guy right now named Daniel Baker who's still in jail on a pre-crime. There's been over 24 pre-crime arrests in the U.S. Do you remember? Yeah, it was the summer of 2020, and there was a bunch of media about in Beto O'Rourke's hometown, there was like a mass shooting. And then the next day in Ohio, there was supposedly another mass shooting, and it was a back-to-back like weekend of mass shootings. And for a little bit, there was a bunch of hay in the media. Donald Trump comes out that Monday and says, we need to give the Department of Justice the ability to scour the deepest, darkest corners of the internet to root out the people who are going to commit these crimes before they commit these crimes, calling for a pre-crime division. A month before that, U.S. then Attorney General Bill Barr was giving a speech where he said, we need the Justice Department to have the capabilities to be able to stop crime before it starts, before something tragic like, God forbid, multiple mass shootings in a very small period of time happen. A month or so later, there's two incidences of mass shootings. Now, it turns out one was a brother who shot his sister and his sister's boyfriend. And it wasn't like multiple mass shooting rampage, but we didn't find that out till later. Initially, it looked like multiple mass shootings back to back. So they called for the pre-crime division. And then on January 1st of the following year, it opened. And on January 15th of that year, they made their first pre-crime arrest.
And was that Daniel Baker?
Yeah, it was Daniel Baker. Yeah, who's he's like a lefty kind of Antifa guy, former military veteran who was trying to organize an armed resistance to a Proud Boy march on the Florida Capitol on January 6th. Nothing to do with DC, ancillary march, but he was trying to be like the left-wing resistance for that, and that got him a visit from multiple law enforcement agencies because of what he put on Facebook about it.
Steve, let's take a short break for these messages and we'll come back. Everybody, this is Steve Poikonen, the co host of Slow News Day and AM Wake Up. You can listen to AM Wake Up on Rockfin. Stay tuned. Everybody, welcome back. We're talking with the co host of AM Wake Up as well as Slow News Day. This is Steve Poikonen.
Hey, hey.
Now, Steve, we've been having a cool time talking about the different films that have predicted the future, often a sci fi dystopian future. And Schwarzenegger seems to be in kind of a lot of them. So we should probably get to Total Recall of 1990.
Yeah, it's an interesting arc with Arnie, isn't it? He does a lot of these predictive programming films and then winds up governor of California. It's kind of weird how you just fall into political success like that. Total Recall is kind of fascinating in a couple of different avenues because one, we are currently sort of having an open conversation about colonizing Mars. We're having an open conversation about memory storage on the cloud, which is sort of, in a very Philip K. Dick way, what he's talking about there. I wish that Hollywood wasn't what Hollywood was, because we deserve better representation of Philip K. Dick's work in film. especially the last several ones. Although Amazon did a series called Electric Sheep, I think, or Electric Dreams, that are all based on Philip K. Dick short stories that I'd recommend. It was pretty cool. Um,
And not to
but
take it away from Schwarzenegger, but Blade Runner also predicted a lot of modern cities from the digital billboards. I guess we don't have the flying cars.
no, but we just did a show that was titled something like "Flying Cars Don't Exist in 15-Minute Cities," because that's where the like micro scale Hunger Gamings of smart cities is sort of being rolled out right now, where you're going to have these like the everything you need is in a 15-minute radius, and you really can't leave it unless you apply for a permit, and you've got carbon credits for your vehicle, and you can only go so many miles, and all kinds of crazy stuff that's being rolled out in the UK right now. Right now. Um, the idea that one, that you could have a company that will hold on to your memories for you, that's not far off. And that's one of the original premises of Total Recall. It's based off of a short story that's I think it's originally titled something like Will um something about your memory at wholesale or something like that was the original Philip K. Dick story. But it was, I mean, it was, effectively the memory storage facility company. Um, and then the obvious disillusionment that people would have growing up in a dystopian Earth, really, the pull that you would have to Mars or any other colonized planet in the process of being colonized, all that kind of like it can't really go west anymore, so you can only go to outer space now if you want to find new territory and all that. These are themes that are totally being pushed right now. So I think when we look at this stuff, it's almost as important, if not more important, beyond the beat you over the head with gadgets theme that is just shoved down your throat, is like, how is the corporation behaving? How is the state behaving? What is media of the future, pushing out onto the audience inside of the film? And what are they being propagandized with? Because I promise you, it's almost always analogous with what we're currently living through.
Yeah, I mean the self-driving cars was another one from Total Recall, and
That's right.
I
It's
know they're
been there.
trying to roll those out to. I don't know if anybody really wants a self-driving car, but
I don't want a car with an automatic transmission, my friend. I really don't. If I can, and I currently, my truck right now has an automatic, and I'm bummed about it. Like, all I want for Christmas, Santa Claus, is a Toyota Hilux to give me the 3-cylinder diesel Toyota Hilux that's good enough. They had to stop making it because it was the most efficient truck ever made. Like, it just that's why they pulled it off the market. It was too efficient.
I was in a brand new Subaru yesterday, and I unplugged the seatbelt before, or unbuckled the seatbelt before we stopped, and the car's still beeping after we're stopped to punish me for taking off my seatbelt early. I don't know what it was, but I just don't really like being barked at by a machine. So I enjoy having an older car, so long as we can still get them.
I was gonna say, is this the segue to 2001: A Space Odyssey? That would be
Yeah,
fitting.
here it says it predicted
Put
tablet
your
computing, space tourism, the
and
International Space.
snarky, back talky computer devices, right? Where your Subaru beeps at you. Put your seatbelt back on, Dave. I've contacted local law enforcement. When's that going to happen? When's your car going to start snitching on you? That's what we really need to know, because I guarantee you there's snitchware built into some of that. And if you're in a self-driving car and you're like, I could get away with a blunt, next thing you know, your car sends a signal to local PD and they've got little blueberries, cherries behind you within a minute or two. That's going to suck. I was going to, yeah, that's another drawback. I hadn't even thought about that until right now.
You know,
Happens when your car snitches.
another thing we saw in the mid and late 80s was the 3D printer in Weird Science and then also in Darkman.
Yeah. I watched Darkman not too long ago, and boy, is that a trippy film.
It
Uh,
holds up.
it really does. I was surprised. And A Scanner Darkly, fantastic. Um, but yeah, I look, I kind of come across as anti-technology a lot, and I'm really not. What I am is anti-sociopath controlled technology. And with the 3D printer, I really do think that we have a pathway towards being much freer from a technocratic state, because you really can do some incredibly vital to survival things with one. And that's down to like 3D printing a concrete mixing machine. You know what I mean?
Wow.
That's down to it. There's a handful of ways that you can generate enough electricity to fully power a house, refrigerator, computers, washer, dryer, the whole nine, just off of running water and a couple of batteries. So, I mean, with 3D printing, we have the opportunity to live much more liberated, live much more individually free. Um, again, it's one of those things that's going to be attempted to be so tightly controlled and regulated, they're going to take all the fun out of it.
Now, I thought we would start with the film Network, the 1976 Sidney Lumet, but I'm realizing we're almost out of time and we haven't got there. Can you tell us anything about that film?
So, okay, it's supposed to be a satire, which is my favorite part about it, is that technically it's supposed to be some sort of like a dark comedy. This is unfortunately more or less the process that happened with decent anchors and decent media people over the last 40 or 50 years. It's what, 74, 76, something like that is when it came out.
Yeah, I think 76.
Um, so right after the church committee is when this movie came out. And then they blame it at the end. They blame what happens on like Maoist rebels or something like that. If you haven't seen the film, I hope I'm not giving away too much there. I do recommend you go watch it. This is talking to anybody who's listening right now. Um, but I mean, we are still in an ongoing let's blame the commies for everything, even the death of our news media, because you're seeing a significant number of outlets, point at the Chinese Communist Party for funding this, that, or the other. So in a literal sense, what happened satirically in metaphor to Howard Beale as the character and critical thinking, original thought media in general is slowly happening, not necessarily by the Chinese Communist Party, more by the handful of corporations that own 98% of US media, which aren't, there's Saudi connections there. There's a whole bunch of connections with Israel and Qatar and Dubai and a lot of other countries, China included. But we're seeing it play out less on an individual level and more on a whole outlet level.
I'm going to read you just a snippet of Ned Beatty's speech in the film. There are no nations, there are no peoples, there are no Russians, there are no Arabs, there are no third worlds, there is no West. There is only one holistic system of systems, one vast and immane, interwoven, interacting, multivariate, multinational dominion of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are almost 50-year-old words. Isn't that crazy?
It could ring true right now. Steve, thanks so much for doing this. It's been a really enlightening show to hear so much, and thanks for being a fountain of knowledge about all the things that we've been scared with in the movies and now have come into the mainstream.
It's very kind of you, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.